The call came through at 2:47 a.m. Singapore time while I was elbow deep in a PLC controller cabinet trying to isolate a cascade failure that had shut down $17 million worth of precision manufacturing equipment. My phone buzzed against my hip. I ignored it. Then it buzzed again and again. I pulled off my work gloves and checked the screen. Royce Drummond, my direct supervisor at Olympus Industrial Solutions, calling from Chicago at what would be 1:47 p.m. his time. I almost didn't answer. When you're managing a production line crisis costing $340,000 per hour in lost output, phone calls from corporate feel less urgent than the blinking fault indicators in front of you. But I answered anyway because that's what 19 years of being a reliable crisis manager conditions you to do. Cordell speaking. Cordell, it's Royce. I need to inform you of a company decision. Effective immediately, we no longer require your services as Senior Manufacturing Systems Engineer. Your employment is terminated as of today. I looked at the control panel in front of me. Fault code 0x4A7C still flashing. Hydraulic pressure sensor 3 showing intermittent readings. Production line B completely offline along with lines C and D due to cascade protection protocols. Singapore plant manager Yuki Tanaka standing 6 feet away looking at me with desperate hope because I was literally the only person who understood this system well enough to diagnose failures this complex. I understand, I said, keeping my voice level. I'll inform the plant manager that you'll be handling the shutdown procedures for the crisis I'm currently managing. Silence. Long enough that I thought the call might have dropped. What crisis? The production line failure that brought me to Singapore yesterday. Lines B, C, and D are offline. The failure is costing approximately $340,000 per hour in lost production. I'm in the middle of diagnosing a hydraulic control system cascade failure. I assume you'll want to send someone else to complete the resolution since I no longer work for Olympus. More silence. I could hear him breathing. Cordell, let's discuss this after you've resolved the Singapore situation. I don't think that's appropriate. You just terminated my employment. I shouldn't be working on Olympus projects if I'm no longer an Olympus employee. I'll brief Yuki on what I've diagnosed so far and catch the next flight back to Chicago. Or actually, not back to Chicago since you said not to bother coming back to the office. I'll fly directly home to Michigan. Wait, Cordell, let me call you back. He ended the call before I could respond. My name is Cordell Vance. I'm 44 years old, and I just got fired while managing a manufacturing crisis that nobody else at my company knows how to solve. Before I explain what happened over the next 48 hours, let me establish who I am and why that phone call was the most expensive mistake Royce Drummond ever made. I joined Olympus Industrial Solutions in 2005 as a manufacturing engineer specializing in automated production systems. Olympus designs and maintains high-precision manufacturing equipment for semiconductor fabrication, medical device production, and aerospace component manufacturing, industries where product tolerances are measured in microns and production line downtime costs hundreds of thousands of dollars per hour. My role was troubleshooting complex failures in the automated systems that Olympus built and maintained for clients. When a production line crashed and the client couldn't diagnose the problem, they called Olympus. Olympus sent me. Over 19 years, I'd responded to 340 emergency manufacturing crises across 14 countries. I diagnosed hydraulic control failures, pneumatic system cascade errors, PLC programming bugs, sensor calibration drift, mechanical tolerance degradation, and dozens of other failure modes that could shut down multi-million-dollar production equipment. Most importantly, I'd developed deep institutional knowledge about the specific systems Olympus had designed and installed. Every client had unique requirements. Every installation had custom modifications. Every system had quirks and edge cases that existed only in my experience-based understanding of how those systems behaved under stress. That knowledge was what made me valuable. That knowledge was also what Royce Drummond had just eliminated from Olympus's available expertise at the worst possible moment. The Singapore crisis had started 31 hours earlier. Vertex Semiconductor Manufacturing, one of Olympus's largest clients, had called our emergency hotline at 7 p.m. Chicago time on Monday, reporting that 3 of their 4 production lines had shut down simultaneously. Vertex manufactured advanced processor chips for consumer electronics. A single production line produced approximately $340,000 worth of chips per hour when running at normal capacity. 3 lines offline meant they were losing over $1 million per hour in production capacity. Olympus's standard protocol for crisis response was to start with remote diagnostics. I spent 3 hours on a video call with Vertex's maintenance team, walking them through diagnostic procedures and reviewing system logs. By 10 p.m., I determined this wasn't something that could be resolved remotely. The failure pattern suggested a fundamental issue with the hydraulic control system that managed precision positioning for all 3 affected lines. I booked a flight to Singapore departing Tuesday morning at 6 a.m. Arrived Wednesday at 2 p.m. local time after 23 hours of travel, including layovers. Went directly from the airport to Vertex's manufacturing facility. Yuki Tanaka, Vertex's plant manager, met me at the facility entrance. She looked exhausted. "Mr. Vance, thank you for coming. We've been offline for 28 hours. Our production schedule is catastrophically behind. Corporate is asking why we can't fix this ourselves. Because this failure pattern is unusual, I need to examine the hydraulic controllers directly." She led me to the production floor. 3 massive automated assembly lines, each one approximately 40 meters long, filled with robotic positioning systems, precision cameras, microscopic assembly tools, and the hydraulic actuators that moved everything with micron-level accuracy. All silent, all offline. All costing Vertex $340,000 per hour. I spent the next 6 hours examining the hydraulic control system, reviewing fault logs, testing sensor readings, and tracing the cascade failure pattern. By 8 p.m. Singapore time, I'd isolated the root cause, a software bug in the pressure compensation algorithm that managed hydraulic pressure variation across temperature changes. Here's what happened. Singapore's facility had experienced unusual temperature fluctuations over the past week, outside temperatures ranging from 24 degrees to 33 degrees due to weather variations. The hydraulic control system was designed to compensate for temperature-related pressure changes automatically. But the compensation algorithm had a subtle bug that accumulated rounding errors over multiple temperature cycles. After 7 days of temperature fluctuations, the accumulated errors had pushed the hydraulic pressure outside of acceptable tolerance. The system detected this and triggered emergency shutdown protocols on Line B. Lines C and D were connected to the same hydraulic supply manifold and automatically shut down as a safety precaution. The bug was in custom code that Olympus had written specifically for Vertex's installation 4 years ago. That code existed nowhere else. I'd been part of the team that designed and implemented it. I was one of 3 people in the entire world who understood how it worked. Fixing it required modifying the pressure compensation algorithm to reset accumulated errors periodically, updating the PLC firmware on all 3 production lines, recalibrating the hydraulic sensors, and then conducting a controlled restart sequence that verified everything was functioning correctly before restoring production. I estimated 12 to 16 hours of work. I started at 8:30 p.m. Wednesday night. By 2 a.m. Thursday, I'd modified the algorithm and was in the middle of uploading updated firmware to the PLC controllers when Royce called and told me I was fired. After Royce hung up, Yuki approached me cautiously. "Mr. Vance, is everything all right? You look concerned." "I just got terminated by my employer while in the middle of fixing your production lines." Her expression went from concerned to horrified. "Terminated? But you're the only person who understands our system. What happens to our lines?" "That's an excellent question. Olympus will need to send someone else to complete the work." "How long will that take?" "I don't know. The other 2 engineers who understand the system are Raphael Chen and Margot Bellamy. Raphael is in Germany managing a client crisis. Margot is on medical leave, recovering from surgery. Olympus might have to wait until one of them becomes available." "How long?" "Raphael's engagement in Germany is scheduled for another 2 weeks. Margot isn't cleared to travel for at least a month." Yuki's face went white. "We can't wait 2 weeks. Every day offline costs us $8.2 million in lost production. 2 weeks would be over $100 million in losses." "Then I suggest you contact Olympus Corporate and explain the urgency." At 3:15 a.m., my phone rang again. This time it was Walter Ashford, Olympus's chief operating officer. Walter had been with the company for 23 years and understood exactly how critical my role was to client crisis management. "Cordell, I just got off the phone with Royce. There's been a misunderstanding about your employment status. We need you to complete the Vertex engagement before we discuss any personnel matters. Walter, Royce was very clear. He said my employment was terminated effective immediately, and I shouldn't bother coming back to the office. That's not a misunderstanding. That's termination. I understand this is confusing, but let's focus on resolving Vertex's crisis first. We can address your employment situation after you've restored their production lines. I don't think that's appropriate. If I'm terminated, I shouldn't be working on Olympus projects. If I'm not terminated, then Royce needs to call me back and clarify that he made an error. This is a critical client situation. Vertex is one of our largest accounts. They're losing hundreds of thousands of dollars per hour. We need you to complete the repair work. Then you need to clarify my employment status first. Am I an Olympus employee or not? Long pause. I could hear Walter thinking through the implications. If he said I was still employed, he'd be contradicting Royce's termination and creating internal political problems. If he said I was terminated, he'd be admitting that Olympus had just eliminated their crisis response capability in the middle of their most expensive emergency. Cordell, let me conference in Royce so we can resolve this together. I'd rather you didn't. Royce was clear about his decision. I'm respecting that decision by no longer working on Olympus projects. If Vertex needs assistance, they should contact Olympus's emergency response line and request another engineer. There is no other engineer available who understands Vertex's system. That's an unfortunate situation, but it's not my problem anymore since I'm no longer an Olympus employee. I ended the call. Yuki was standing nearby, having heard my side of the conversation. What should we do, Mr. Vance? You should contact Olympus and request emergency engineering support. Explain the urgency of the situation. They'll prioritize getting someone here as quickly as possible. But you're here now. You understand our system. You were in the middle of fixing it. Can't you just complete the work? I was fired 37 minutes ago. I can't ethically continue working on a project for a company that just terminated my employment. What if we hired you directly? Not through Olympus, but as an independent consultant working for Vertex? I thought about that carefully. That would create contractual complications. Vertex has a maintenance agreement with Olympus. That agreement probably has exclusivity provisions preventing you from hiring outside engineers to work on Olympus-designed systems. I'll check our contract. She pulled out her phone and called Vertex's legal counsel in Japan. Had a rapid conversation in Japanese that I couldn't follow. Hung up and looked at me with cautious optimism. Our legal team says the maintenance agreement has exclusivity provisions for routine maintenance, but emergency repairs can be conducted by any qualified engineer if Olympus cannot provide timely support. They're defining timely support as within 48 hours of request. Has Vertex formally requested emergency support from Olympus? I'll do that right now. She sent an email to Olympus's emergency response team with me copied, formally requesting immediate engineering support for the production line failure and noting that the previous engineer, me, was no longer available to complete the repair work. She marked it urgent and requested response within 2 hours. At 4:47 a.m., we received a response from Olympus's emergency coordinator. We acknowledge your request for emergency engineering support. Our senior manufacturing systems engineers are currently committed to other client emergencies. We are working to identify available resources and will provide an estimated response timeline within 24 hours. 24 hours. Meaning Vertex would be offline for at least another full day, probably longer, meaning another $8.2 million in lost production at minimum. Yuki showed me the email. What does this mean? It means Olympus doesn't have anyone available to send. Raphael is in Germany, Margot is on medical leave, and apparently nobody else at Olympus has the expertise to handle this type of failure. So we wait? Unless you want to exercise your contract provision and hire an independent consultant. Are you available as an independent consultant? I could be. What would your rate be? I thought about that carefully. Independent consulting rates for emergency manufacturing crisis response typically range from $500 to $1,200 per hour depending on expertise level and urgency. I was at the top of the expertise scale, and this was definitely urgent. $1,400 per hour for emergency crisis response, minimum 40-hour engagement to ensure complete resolution and system validation. That's $56,000 total. Payment terms, 50% deposit before I resume work, remaining 50% upon successful production line restoration. Yuki didn't hesitate. Done. I'll have our CFO process the deposit immediately. At 6:30 a.m. Thursday morning, $28,000 cleared into my business account. At 6:45 a.m., I resumed work on Vertex's hydraulic control system. By 2:00 p.m. Thursday afternoon, I completed the firmware updates, recalibrated all sensors, and was beginning the controlled restart sequence. By 6:00 p.m., Line B was running at full production capacity with no faults. By 8:30 p.m., Line C was operational. By 10:00 p.m., Line D was restored. Total downtime, 51 hours. Total production loss, approximately 17.3 million. But the lines were running again, and the fix I'd implemented would prevent recurrence of the temperature compensation bug. Yuki was watching the production monitors with visible relief as chips began moving through the assembly process. Mr. Vance, I cannot thank you enough. You saved us from a disaster that would have been catastrophically worse if we'd waited for Olympus to send another engineer. You're welcome. I'll prepare a technical report documenting the failure cause and repair procedures. You should share that with Olympus so they can update their systems documentation. Will you be available if we have questions during the follow-up period? Yes, my consulting arrangement includes 30 days of follow-up support for any issues related to this repair. At 11:47 p.m. Thursday night, I received a call from Walter Ashford. I was back at my hotel, exhausted, but satisfied with the day's work. Cordell, I understand you completed the Vertex repair work as an independent consultant. That's correct. We need to discuss your employment status. Royce's decision to terminate you was premature. We'd like to offer you reinstatement with full back pay and benefits. I appreciate that, but I'm declining. I'm now operating as an independent consultant. It's more lucrative, and I have better control over which projects I accept. What does that mean for Olympus? You're our most experienced crisis response engineer. It means Olympus will need to develop other engineers with similar expertise or accept that your crisis response capability is significantly reduced. That's not acceptable. We have ongoing client emergencies that require your specific knowledge. Then Olympus should have considered that before terminating me while I was literally in the middle of managing one of those emergencies. Cordell, I understand you're upset about how Royce handled the situation. I'm not upset, Walter. I'm simply making rational business decisions based on new information. Royce demonstrated that Olympus doesn't value my contributions enough to avoid terminating me during a crisis. I've learned from that demonstration. Now, I'm valuing my contributions appropriately by charging market rates as an independent consultant. What would it take to bring you back to Olympus? I'm not interested in coming back, but I'm willing to discuss limited consulting arrangements for specific emergencies where my expertise is genuinely necessary. What would those arrangements look like? Olympus can retain me as an emergency crisis consultant. $2,000 per hour for active crisis work, $8,000 monthly retainer for availability and consultation. 6-month contract, renewable at my discretion. I work remotely unless travel is absolutely necessary, and travel time is billed at the active crisis rate. Silence while Walter processed the numbers. My previous salary as senior manufacturing systems engineer had been $127,000 annually. I was now proposing a consulting arrangement that would cost Olympus approximately $96,000 annually just for the retainer, plus potentially hundreds of thousands more if they actually needed me for crisis response. That's significantly more expensive than your previous compensation. That's correct, but it's less expensive than what happened at Vertex when you didn't have me available. They lost $17.3 million during 51 hours of downtime. They would have lost over $100 million if they'd waited 2 weeks for Raphael to become available. My consulting rate is expensive. My absence is more expensive. I need to discuss this with executive leadership. Take your time. I'm not going anywhere. Over the next 3 weeks, I received 7 emergency calls from former Olympus clients experiencing manufacturing crises. Each call followed the same pattern. Critical production line failure. Olympus couldn't send an engineer quickly enough. Could I help as an independent consultant? I helped all 7 clients. Total consulting revenue, $384,000 for 3 weeks of work. Word spreads fast in the precision manufacturing industry. By mid-May, I was receiving calls from companies that had never worked with Olympus, asking if I was available for emergency crisis response and ongoing systems optimization consulting. By June, I had 8 long-term consulting contracts with manufacturing companies who wanted guaranteed access to my expertise when they needed it. Combined retainer revenue, $62,000 monthly, approximately $744,000 annually, plus additional project fees. In July, Olympus formally offered me the consulting arrangement I'd proposed to Walter. $2,000 hour active work, $8,000 monthly retainer, 6-month renewable contract. I accepted because it was guaranteed revenue, and Olympus represented one of the most reliable sources of emergency work. Royce Drummond lasted until September. The board terminated him after they calculated that his decision to fire me during the Vertex crisis had cost Olympus approximately $2.8 million in lost client confidence, emergency recovery costs, and consulting fees they were now paying me instead of employing me directly. The $2.8 million breakdown: Vertex had reduced their annual maintenance contract with Olympus by $600,000, citing concerns about response capability. 3 other clients had similarly reduced their contracts after hearing about the Vertex situation. Olympus had paid premium rates to reassign Raphael from Germany to cover emergencies I would have handled, incurring approximately $180,000 in expedited travel and overtime costs. And they were now paying me $96,000 annually in retainer fees, plus crisis rates that were 40% higher than my previous compensation. All because Royce had decided to fire me at 2:47 a.m. while I was literally fixing a $340,000 per hour crisis. Walter called me in October. "Cordell, I want you to know that Olympus has restructured our engineering management. Royce is no longer with the company. We've learned from this situation." "What have you learned?" "That institutional knowledge has value that isn't captured in salary comparisons. That crisis response capability requires deep expertise that can't be quickly replaced. That decisions about personnel should consider operational impact, not just budget line items." "Those are good lessons. We'd like to discuss bringing you back as a full-time employee. We're prepared to offer significantly improved compensation and a formal role as Director of Crisis Response Engineering." "I appreciate that, but I'm earning more as an independent consultant than I ever did as an Olympus employee. And I have better work-life balance because I choose which projects to accept. Why would I give that up?" "Because you built your career at Olympus. Because we value your contributions. Because we want to make this right." "Walter, you can make this right by continuing our consulting arrangement and by valuing your remaining engineers appropriately. Don't repeat with someone else what Royce did to me. Learn from the $2.8 million lesson." I stayed independent. By late 2024, I was managing 14 long-term consulting relationships with manufacturers across 3 continents. Annual revenue was approaching $1.2 million. I was working approximately 60% of the hours I'd worked at Olympus, while earning nearly 10 times my previous salary. More importantly, I was valued. When clients called me for crisis response, they understood they were paying premium rates for premium expertise. Nobody called me too expensive. Nobody questioned whether my approach was worth the investment. They'd all seen what happened when they tried to solve manufacturing crises without specialized expertise. Production lines stayed offline, losses accumulated, and eventually they called me anyway. In early 2025, I was invited to speak at the International Manufacturing Systems Conference about crisis response management. I used the Vertex situation as a case study, anonymizing details, but explaining how a single personnel decision during a crisis had cost a consulting firm millions in long-term impact. The presentation focused on 3 principles. First, institutional knowledge is operational infrastructure. When you eliminate experienced engineers during active crises, you're not reducing payroll. You're destroying critical capabilities that took decades to develop. Second, crisis response expertise is economically valuable precisely because it's rare and difficult to replace. Companies that treat crisis engineers as interchangeable commodities learn expensive lessons when crises occur and nobody knows how to solve them. Third, the cost of expertise is always less than the cost of downtime. A 1,400-hour consultant who can restore a $340,000 hour production line in 51 hours is dramatically less expensive than waiting 2 weeks for a cheaper alternative. After the presentation, 9 companies approached me about consulting engagements or permanent positions. I declined the permanent positions and accepted 3 consulting arrangements. The irony isn't lost on me. Olympus paid me $127,000 annually to maintain their crisis response capability. Now they pay me $96,000 annually just to be available, plus $2,000 an hour when they actually need me. Last year, Olympus paid me approximately $340,000 total for retainer and crisis work, nearly 3 times my former salary. And I'm still less expensive than what the Vertex crisis would have cost if they'd eliminated me 6 months earlier instead of mid-crisis. Here's what I learned from the entire experience. The most dangerous employee to fire isn't the one who complains about salary or threatens to quit. It's the one who's literally in the middle of solving a crisis that nobody else knows how to solve when you decide they're expendable. Because when you fire that person, you don't just lose their future contributions, you lose their ability to prevent the immediate disaster that's happening right now, and you discover that replacing specialized expertise during an emergency is impossible. You can only wait until the crisis becomes catastrophic enough that economic reality forces you to pay whatever it takes to get that expertise back. Royce wanted to reduce headcount and eliminate what he saw as an expensive senior engineer. He got exactly what he wanted. I was eliminated. The headcount was reduced, and the salary line item disappeared from his budget. What he didn't anticipate was that my salary was actually insurance against the cost of manufacturing crises. He was paying $127,000 annually to prevent multi-million-dollar losses. When he eliminated that insurance, he immediately discovered why it existed. 47 minutes after firing me, he was calling back trying to undo his decision. 12 hours after that, Olympus's COO was offering reinstatement. 3 weeks after that, they were begging me to accept a consulting arrangement at triple my former compensation. Sometimes the best revenge isn't proving people wrong. It's letting them experience the full cost of being right about what they wanted. Royce wanted me gone. I was gone. Then he got to explain to his executives why the company's most critical client crisis was costing an additional $8.2 million per day because the engineer who could fix it was no longer employed. I didn't sabotage Olympus. I didn't cause Vertex's crisis. I didn't prevent other engineers from solving the problem. I simply wasn't there anymore to solve problems that only I knew how to solve because I was no longer required. That turned out to be the most expensive termination decision Royce Drummond ever made, and the most lucrative career transition I ever experienced.